to have an understanding how libertarian philosophy can apply or approach the certain people that feel that things like healthcare and education should be free for all. How does that fit in with no taxation and items like that? Thank you. Hashtag Space Pony.
So this is a question from the amazing and lovely and beautiful Dawn Hicks, the wife of hashtag Laser Legend Matt Hicks, who is my campaign manager. And Miss Dawn is going to be doing some questions here and there. She is the hashtag Space Pony, pictured here. And that's an excellent question, Dawn. So here's what libertarians agree with people who are saying, because what we're hearing from people who are saying that healthcare should be free, that education should be free. What they're saying is education and healthcare are so unaffordable that most people can't afford it without government assistance. Like they literally cannot afford healthcare or higher education, much less both of them, especially younger people, without the government being involved. And that was not always the case. They're one of the first generations where that's always been the case. And when they talk to their parents and grandparents, they go, well, you should just do it the way I did it. You go to college and you work your way through it and you get out and then you can pay off your debt within a couple years and then you can go buy a house a few years later. That's not true anymore. The cost of education, the cost of housing, just the cost of living has gone through the roof. And the cost of specifically healthcare, housing, and education has gone up something like tenfold since the time that their parents were in their situation. And even more than that, 30 and 40-fold since their grandparents were in that situation. And the cost of their actual wages have not gone up anywhere near that much. So they're truly being left behind by the system. So when I hear people saying healthcare is a right, education should be free, healthcare should be free, here's their concern. Very few of them are ideological socialists or are ideologically drawn to wanting this type of stuff, free healthcare, free anything else. They just want to be able to afford it. They want to be able to know that these things are accessible and affordable in the way that they need it. Well, we agree. And we look at the history of government's involvement in education and healthcare. We look at the fact that every single time, with each further injection into those markets and housing and everything else that government has gotten into, the cost of those things continues to skyrocket as a direct result of government involvement for two reasons. Number one, they add subsidies and regulations that necessarily drive up the cost. And the subsidies, because here's what gets lost a lot, especially with higher education. When you subsidize something, you allow that price to be higher without any corresponding loss in patients. Hospitals are packed with people. Doctors' offices are packed with people. Healthcare centers, or education centers, colleges and universities are packed with people right now, even though the costs keep going up because the government adds subsidies, which allows these providers to go, well, if I'm not losing anyone, I don't need to lower the price. So there's no price signaling that forces that there's no threat to the change in demand that would make them bring the prices down. But then there's also the regulatory burdens that get added that make it more expensive. In the case of healthcare, and I'm sure with education as well, up to 75% of the cost of healthcare is directly related to compliance with various Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance regulations. If you took that out, the cost of healthcare immediately would drop 75% right there. And that's before you get into any other state or federal regulations related to healthcare. Those things alone would change the cost of healthcare and higher education. Here's another thing that has happened specific with healthcare. Because of our ridiculous intellectual property laws, our ridiculous patent laws, there are companies that go into pharmaceutical companies, they buy the company, they gut the research and development teams, they gut everything, they fire almost everyone, and they squat on the patents that they had, that they were bought in the process of buying that company, and they jack up the price 10, 20, 30 times, 100 times what it was before, on patents for drugs that are in some cases decades old and should be generic at this point. And Republicans and Democrats sign off on that. It is that government protection of these ridiculous patent laws that allows the cost of pharmaceuticals, which affects the entire cost of healthcare, to go through the roof. That is another thing we would get rid of. We would get rid of the burdens, subsidies, regulations, and mandates that drive up the cost of healthcare and education and housing and everything else. Because it's not the doctors that are making more money than ever before. It's the cronies who have bought the politicians to put these policies in place, and we will get rid of those. So thank you for that question. And this was